Hello, everyone. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, and that means it's time to begin our 71st CoCoRaHS WxTalk Webinar. Wow, 71 webinars. We've really done a bunch of them here over the years. Very warm welcome to all of you joining us today. I'm your host, meteorologist Henry Regis. Running the technical side of our program is our very own Noah Newman. And we're coming to you live from smoky, boy, the smoke is pretty thick this morning, Fort Collins, Colorado, here on this last day of September. For those of you who are unable to join us for our live broadcast, we are recording today's talk and it will be available later this week on our website. All of our WeatherTalk webinars are sponsored by generous donations from listeners just like you. Well, today's WeatherTalk webinar, let's see if this may sound familiar to you.
Fort Collins, Colorado, clear. The temperature is 65 degrees.
You may recognize that as NOAA Weather Radio, and that's going to be the focus of today's broadcast today. Have you ever listened to it or been woken up by one of its alerts in the middle of the night? Perhaps that has really saved you from severe weather coming to your area. Well, with us today, we're very fortunate to have Mr. Weather Radio himself. I kind of dubbed him that. Meteorologist Bruce Thomas. He's the chief meteorologist for the News Press Gazette in St. Joseph, Missouri. And if there's one person who knows NOAA Weather Radio, it's Bruce. Bruce is a graduate of the University of Denver, known as Metro State before they just changed their name. He's the past president of the National Weather Association. And Bruce has got a lot of recognitions and awards over the years during his long career. Some of them, the U.S. Department of Commerce Meritorious Service Award. That's a tongue twister for promoting NOAA Weather Radio. He's done the NOAA Mark Trail Award for promoting weather radio across America. The Commonwealth of Kentucky gave him a Kentucky Colonel Honorary for weather safety education using NOAA Weather Radio. And recently, the Storm Ready Champion Award for help with Weather Radio Nation campaign, the Weather Radio Nation campaign to distribute millions of NOAA Weather Radios to people in need. Bruce is originally from Jackson, Mississippi. He now resides in the suburbs of Kansas City. I know him personally. He's an avid Chiefs fan and a season ticket holder, as well as a supporter of Sporting KC Soccer. Well, let's give a warm welcome to an old friend of CoCoRaHS. Bruce, it's great to have you with us today. Hey, tell us a little bit about how you became interested in weather.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Henry. I want to thank you and Noah Newman for your allowing me to do this today and be part of this wonderful podcasting event. And number 71, as you told me. So we're having setting a new milestone at 71 today, and it's been a really cool honor to work with so many wonderful people in the weather field all these years, and NOAA Weather Radio has been a big part of that for me. You know, Henry, during my childhood, I was raised in Jackson, Mississippi, like you had originally introduced me as a Mississippian. I was in quite a few weather events and severe weather events that led to my fascination with weather, let's say. And when you're fascinated with weather, that is something that you can't get out of your system. And there's usually a weather event that has caused the fascination to be something that you just can't control and you have to learn more about. And I've labeled a few of the events and wanted to share some of this with you. I started out when I was 4 years old. My mother and grandmother were driving the old Chrysler, heading towards Candlestick Park Shopping Center. It was a new shopping center. Things were just developing, leaving the downtown areas, and shopping centers were being developed around the country. And it was a grand opening, actually, and a big sale going on. And my mom had the kids loaded in the back seat. We were driving to that. And she was listening to radio, as AM back then, and they heard a bulletin about a tornado. And the sky had turned black and possibly even a little green. And my mother stopped the car and pulled over. And we sat there for a while because she was listening to the car radio. And the Candlestick Park Shopping Center, which we were heading to, was completely destroyed by a violent tornado. Later, it was ranked an F5, but we didn't have that ranking at the time. It was just called a violent tornado, and it killed 58 people and injured 500. So we were very fortunate that my mother's innate sense was not to keep driving to the shopping center. So that was just, I was 4 years old, and I remember it, sitting on the back seat of the big Chrysler. Car was blue. You know, you remember things like that. And just a couple years later, my family was vacationing down the Mississippi Gulf Coast, as many Mississippians do, or did at the time. And a hurricane named Camille came the week after we were there, and it completely annihilated the area. Now, again, we didn't have a CAT scale rating at that time. The Saffir-Simpson scale would be developed after Hurricane Camille. And that was developed by the director of the National Hurricane Center and an engineer named Saffir-Simpson. Simpson was the director of the Hurricane Center, Bob Simpson. And so out of Camille came the CAT scale that we use now, Cat 1 to Cat 5 rating of hurricanes, Camille being the top of the scale. It was sustained 180 mile an hour winds, storm surge over 22 feet, and it just erased the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I mean, it really was amazing. And as a 6-year-old child, we were allowed to go back in and tour. That was August 17th of 1969. We were allowed to go back in and tour the destruction in October. And we had just vacationed there the week before it hit. So it was unbelievable. And I actually was in the storm, because when it came through Jackson, Mississippi, 160 miles inland, it was still a hurricane. So as a kid, I got to see, you know, what it was like to be inland when a major hurricane and go see the destruction. Thus fascinating me. And another tidbit that I want to share with you is that NOAA Weather Radio was in its infancy in 1969. And out of this, NOAA was organized, and the National Weather Service and the President Nixon actually visited the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I was talking to a former meteorologist in charge from the Weather Service yesterday, and he told me that because a lot of people said they didn't get the warning, NOAA Weather Radio was spread across all the Gulf Coast states and the Atlantic seaboard, basically where hurricanes hit the U.S., Atlantic hurricanes. So NOAA Weather Radio also had a big part of its growth came out of Hurricane Camille. So my mother, my family, I'm talking a little bit about me first before we get started. My mother was the first licensed female contractor in the state of Mississippi. And after Hurricane Camille, she hired a crew and went down to the Gulf Coast to rebuild properties. And we ended up in 1973, we were building a house right on Highway 90 on the beach there, rebuilding the front of it. I was 10 years old, and we were camping actually in the house. House had no front or back walls, just a roof with some sidewalls holding it up. It was 4 years after the hurricane, but things were still boarded up. It was, you know, things didn't get repaired as quickly back then, and this house was devastated. But we repaired it. But we were sitting on the front porch, and it was August 1st, 1973, and it was pouring down rain, lightning and thundering, and we're basically outside with a roof over us. And I looked out and I saw one little dark line coming down from the sky. It looked like a finger, just a dark line against the kind of the grayish white background. And there was a gentleman named Willie. He was one of the foremen, an African-American man that worked with my family for years. And I looked over at Willie and I said, "Look at that." I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "That's a tornado, son. And it's a water spout." And it went just east of us and landed over in Ocean Springs on the beach. And, you know, those things drop fish and water down on the beach. And it was fascinating. So it was my first time to actually see a water spout or tornado. And I was 10 years old. So it started building that. How do people get warned for these things? These things just happen and you don't even know they happened, and there's no news about it. And it's just kind of interesting. So I went on and went to high school, graduated from high school. I was in 1979 in Jackson, Mississippi. I was a senior in high school. I was 16 years old, and a flood happened. And actually, I was out with some friends at a drive-in theater. We had dates. It was 3 guys and 3 girls, and my mother's, she had an Oldsmobile then, big Oldsmobile. And we were at a drive-in theater, and it started raining. And it just kept raining and raining and raining. The water actually came up to the side of the car while we're sitting in the movie theater or outside, at the drive-in theater. And we tried to drive home in this, and water was up on the sides of the doors of the car. Never heard about turn around and don't drown back then, but it wasn't any elevation. It was flat, just the water was rising because it was so much rain. And ended up getting 17.5 inches of rain north of Jackson in the Pearl River Basin. And then the sky became crystal blue, and it was a beautiful blue sky. But all that water upstream had to come through the Pearl River and the Jackson Reservoir and flow downstream. And so we sat there under blue skies for 2 weeks watching the water rise. And it rose and rose and rose, so they couldn't stop it. And it ended up flooding 40,000 homes and businesses in Jackson, Mississippi, April of 1979. And that made a huge impression on me because a great deal of my friends' homes, my girlfriend, my best friend, all their homes flooded. Luckily, our house was up on the top of a hill, and we didn't flood, but my dad's businesses flooded. And my dad had a liquor store, one of his many businesses. He had a liquor store. He never ran it. He just owned it. And water got in the liquor store about 4 feet deep, and we had to break. I was too young to do it, but they had to break every single bottle under the vision of the ABC, Alcohol Beverage Control Board. Can you picture somebody out there breaking thousands of bottles of wine and liquor after a flood in a big dumpster? And those kind of things make an impression on you. And my dad had a clothing store. He was in the clothing business in Jackson, Mississippi. It was called Thomas Great Mercantile. And it had been in downtown Jackson for over 50 years, but it got several feet of water in it also. And then Hurricane Frederick. So I graduated from high school early. I never went to 12th grade. I went straight to college at Mississippi State University. And I was the youngest freshman at Mississippi State University in the fall of 1979. I was in college algebra, my first attempt at college algebra. And I was sitting there, and the guy next to me, handsome guy, was from Pensacola Beach, Florida. He looked over and said, there's a hurricane going to hit the coast tonight. And I said, no, I hadn't heard about it. So Hurricane Frederick had kind of snuck in, and, we didn't have the Weather Channel back then. It hadn't started yet. And people just didn't follow the weather. We were freshmen in college. We had other things on our mind. But Hurricane Frederick hit right on the Mississippi-Alabama state line, about category 3, but it was impression. I went down to the coast with a friend to board up our house that we had in Biloxi at the time. And my mother was out of state, and so I went down and boarded up the house, and we evacuated a couple of the cars that were there on the beach and took it all back to Jackson. But I did go to the coast for my first hurricane, Frederick, but we got out of there. We were the only car heading south that afternoon, and we were the only car heading north that night because they'd already evacuated. We were the last ones out, me and another 18, 19-year-old kid. But that formed an impression, and those impressions don't go away very easily. So that's what happens, when these things happen. Now, can we change slides now? Do you have control of the slides?
This is your screen, so you should be.
There we go.
You got it.
I've got it.
Yeah, Bruce, fascinating stories about that. I mean, it's funny how everyone in their younger ages that have become meteorologists have different experiences, and this is really interesting.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't want to go too deep in it, but it's important because over the years, I've mentored scores of young meteorologists at TV stations and in my professional career. And I guess about 80% of them have a weather event like a Katrina or a Joplin tornado or a major snowmageddon that got them interested in weather, and that's when they got into it. And NOAA Weather Radio, for many of us older meteorologists, is a big part of how we learned about weather and how we had something that gave us weather information. We didn't have smartphones. We didn't have the internet. The internet really didn't come on strong until the mid to late 90s. So the younger people on this podcast, it was, weather radio was one of the only things you had. In 1997, I was a meteorologist in Waco, Texas, a beautiful little TV station near KCEN Channel 6, NBC station. And we had a big tornado come through, and we lost power. And the only information I had at the station until the power came back on was NOAA Weather Radio. but it allowed me to keep tracking that tornado. When the power came back on in about a few minutes, I was able to go back on the air. So having a weather radio was instrumental in me being able to stay informed. And that ended up being the Lake Belton and then the Gerald, Texas tornado that day that killed 28 people. And having a NOAA Weather Radio kept me informed because we didn't have a generator at the station at the time, and we had to keep getting information. So it's very important.
Bruce,
yeah.
Go ahead. I remember myself listening to NOAA Weather Radio in the 70s because, like you said, there was no Weather Channel at that point, and you wanted to know what the radar was doing. And every 3 hours they would update, and here's here's what's going on with the radar. And so if you had storms coming, you didn't know where they were and stuff like that. You didn't have internet to look at, but weather radio was, and that was on a shortwave radio at that time, to be able to listen and kind of figure out what was happening. So again, it in my childhood, that was an important thing.
So what I want to do, Henry, and all of you listening, is take you back in time to where weather radio. Let's see. I'm trying to change the slide here. I don't know why it's not changing, but do you have the ability to change it? Do you guys have the?
No, this is your screen. You should be able to maybe use your arrow. There you
we
are.
Go.
Yep.
There we go. Yeah. The history of weather radio. I want to talk about transmitters, broadcast transmitters. I want to talk a little about radio frequencies, weather radio receivers, specific area message encoding, alerting, and emergency alert test procedures, and then the new voices that are being heard on weather radio. So let's start out by talking about weather radio history, because it wasn't called NOAA Weather Radio when it began, because NOAA didn't start till 1970, is when NOAA ESSE was what the weather service was called, ESSA, before NOAA for about 5 years. It was the prelude to NOAA. But this goes way back before that. This goes all the way back into the 50s. The history of weather radio was really created to get weather information to ships and airplanes on the Great Lakes and in the North Atlantic region, broadcasting directly into the cockpits of airplanes and onto the bridges of ships at sea. When a plane is trying to land at a major airport, they need to know what direction the wind is from. They also need a good altimeter setting to determine their height and elevation. So these things are crucial. And in 1950, this is one of the ways, using a radio broadcast to get that information into the cockpits of the airplanes. Well, the first tower was constructed in New York City, KWO 35, and that was constructed to get information, again, to the airplanes and the ships at sea in New York City, and then just followed a year or two later in Chicago. And for a long time, these two sites, which were the two major population centers in America, New York and Chicago, and LA was still growing, at a big pace, but New York and Chicago and had lots of air traffic, and they also had the Great Lakes and the North Atlantic, New England area, and all that traffic, ship traffic and plane traffic. So that's why it began so early in the mid 50s. And then Kansas City in the 60s got the third transmitter, KID 77, which is still in use today at my house here in Kansas City. And the reason it was put in Kansas City is because the Severe Storms Forecast Center was located here, cells, and we had the forecast where all the watches, or for all the country, tornado watches and severe thunderstorm watches used to come out of Kansas City before it was moved to Norman, Oklahoma, where they call it SPC, or Storm Prediction Center now. But for decades, it all came out of Kansas City. And the reason why it was located in Kansas City, right here in the middle of the country, is because the AT&T switch crossed here for the country and allowed them to get telecommunications out more quickly to all the states and weather service offices and emergency managers. So you always wanted to know why Kansas City was that location. We are in the middle of the country and we're in Tornado Alley, but it was really because of telecommunications. At the time, we didn't have fiber optics and we didn't have satellites to communicate through much. It was all about switches and landlines and microwaves. Then Honolulu got the next site. So the first 4 NOAA Weather Radio transmitters in America: New York, Chicago, Kansas City, and Honolulu, going from East Coast all the way as far west, basically, as you go in the U.S. And all that happened, early on. And then there was a little lag there, and they started adding more stations. And after Hurricane Camille in 1969, we were up to 100 broadcast transmitters broadcasting out to 40 miles in all directions across America. So we're at 100 stations in 1976, but between 1976 and 1979, a huge number of stations started getting developed. We had the super outbreak of tornadoes in 1974, and that helped, forecasters really push the idea we need this for tornado warnings, and we need to have more transmitters so we can reach more people across Tornado Alley. So by 1979, we're up to 300 transmitters. And then look at the jump over the next 2 decades to 1979. We went from 300 to 500 stations. So at 500 broadcast stations, we've got a really nice coverage across the country. But then you have areas where the signals aren't as strong, or maybe not getting enough signal to tone alert the radio to get an alarm. So they added, again, in those couple of years, from 1999 to 2001, they added 300 more transmitters with the help of the USDA and some big grants and money through the government. And Al Gore actually had a lot to do with it. He was a big advocate of NOAA Weather Radio. Al Gore is Vice President of the United States, and he helped get more funding, and things happened, and more transmitters got out there. And then by 2010, we had 1,000 transmitters, and that was the big milestone everybody was waiting for. And out of those 1,000, we had 5 Spanish language transmitters from Salton Sea, California, El Paso, Texas, and we had transmitters there. And then new transmitters went in Brownsville, Texas, down the Rio Grande Valley in 2015 and 16, and in Miami, they have the Hialeah transmitter. So across the southern tier, in the heaviest concentration of Hispanic or Spanish-speaking population, there's 5 continuous broadcasting Spanish language transmitters. And in Puerto Rico, they broadcast in Spanish and English on the same transmitter. It just rotates about every 5 minutes. And what's interesting about Puerto Rico is there's 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico, and every single one of those municipalities has its own SAME code, which I'm going to explain to you in a little while. So you can target every little village and town and municipality in Puerto Rico with a special message directly from the San Juan, Puerto Rico Weather Service office. And after Hurricane Maria, NOAA Weather Radio and one AM CBS radio station were the only things left working for weeks and weeks on the island of Puerto Rico after Maria. But Weather Radio withstood the hurricane, and if people had receivers, they could still get information. So very important. And today we're at 1,032 stations broadcasting across the entire United States, all of our protectorates, and all the states and protectorates. So that's important, to have that kind of coverage across the country. And we continue to see that being something that will continue to grow slowly now. I think we have that coverage that continues to cover the area. So what I wanted to show you, and this is the coverage area of the first NOAA Weather Radio transmitter, and that being in New York City. And it's moved a couple of times from Rockefeller Center. After the Twin Towers came down, it was moved to Rockefeller Center, and then it's on the Empire State Building now. So it's interesting the different places it's gone. And it has the most population under one transmitter, and I've heard anywhere from 15 million to 17 million Americans can get NOAA Weather Radio information off that transmitter. It was down for quite a long time because moving a transmitter in New York City is very difficult, and they were having some bleed over into some Coast Guard frequencies for some reason, and some other government emergency frequencies with Homeland Security, and there was some problems. And it went on for like 18 months. This thing was off the air. It was terrible, but things have improved, and we now see it back up and running, I believe, in New York City. So why you need different frequencies is because you have this expanse of information going out about 40 to 50 miles, and most transmitters are either 300-watt transmitters or 1,000-watt transmitters, with the 1,000-watt transmitters having a little bigger broadcast footprint and a little bit better ability to penetrate walls and buildings to get the tone alert into your radio so that they'll go off. And this shows you Detroit area and up to the thumb of Michigan out over the Great Lakes, how these signals overlap. But then there's a transmitter that's specific for your region or for your counties, but all these can come out of one National Weather Service office. And then in the old days, there would be actual human voice on all of these transmitters, and they would hire people to broadcast occasionally NOAA Weather Radio to free up the forecasters. And that was my first opportunity to broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio as a 19-year-old kid. They hired me in Jackson, Mississippi to come in at night from 11 at night to 7 in the morning and broadcast all night on NOAA Weather Radio when I was not at college. And that was the first dollar I ever made as a meteorologist or broadcaster. I wasn't a meteorologist yet. I was working at it. But as a broadcaster, the first dollar I ever made. They paid me $3.35 an hour. They said I was overpaid, and I really was, because I was terrible. But they said I couldn't hurt many people in the middle of the night, and if it came to a tone alerting, a warning, they would come in and do that with me. So, but it was interesting, and again, it was neat for a guy wanting to get into broadcasting to have that opportunity in Jackson, Mississippi. I'll always thank them for letting me come and do that in the early 80s when I was in college. At that time, I was at Mississippi State University. So, again, there's 7 different frequencies that go from 162.400 to 162.550, and it's broken into quarter frequencies. So 162.425, 162.55, it breaks it up, and there are 7 different frequencies that are on NOAA Weather Radio. So that allows you to not overlap as much onto the other transmitters. But sometimes at your home, you can pick up 2 different transmitters. So it's always good to know which transmitter warns your county using the SAME code, because if you can hear a transmitter doesn't mean it's the right transmitter for you. And it's a little confusing. Usually the most powerful signal and best sound quality, 95% of the time, is your transmitter. But sometimes you might get some bleed over that sounds pretty clear from another transmitter that may not be tone alerting your radio receiver. So you need to always be cognizant of having the right programming for your radio to the right transmitter. I just want to tell you that because there are millions and millions of weather radio receivers currently in use across America. We've done some studies, maybe 18 to 20 million weather radio receivers that are in use. And that can be in two-way radios, marine radios, CB radios, desktop weather radios, portable crank weather radios, little handheld weather radios. Sound like a commercial there, but yeah, that's all out there. And I was lucky and fortunate to be part of helping to spread this information, because what I found out working in Texas after some major tornadoes, a lot of people didn't know about the NOAA Weather Radio network. And in 1991, I took a tone alert NOAA Weather Radio, which predates the SAME digital burst, and I took it on the air at the TV station during Severe Weather Awareness Week, which I was in Waco, Texas, Waco Temple Killeen College Station at the time, and I tone alerted the radio. And here's what a tone alert sounds like. I turned it on because I didn't think people had ever really knew that this could really happen in their homes if there was a warning. So and that's a test alert of a NOAA Weather Radio. And I did that on the air, and the meteorologist in charge of the Waco Weather Service, that's before the modernization spun that office down and took down the radar, saw me do that, and he sent that to Washington because they said they thought I was the only person that had ever taken a tone alert weather radio to their knowledge on television and tone alerted it and told people to go get one. And I found it strange, but I got that award from the Department of Commerce, Meritorious Service Award, for doing that. And one day I was called to work early, and in broadcasting, that's not always good. That might mean you're getting fired. And the MIC was there with the station's general manager, and they shot video and gave me this award. But that was in 1991. So that's, at that point, TV stations looked at NOAA Weather Radio as competition in some ways. I can't tell you how many times I heard a news director, general manager saying, we don't want that competition. We're the weather source. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it that people needed the warning as fast as they could get it straight from the source. And that's what NOAA Weather Radio does. It's straight from the Weather Service office. When it's issued, it's ringing that alarm in your house within 10 seconds and gives you and your family the best opportunity to take cover and survive what could be a deadly weather event. Again, alerting the public. When seconds count for life-saving information on NOAA Weather Radio, and the network is one of America's legacy warning systems, covering more than 95% of the U.S. population, including Guam, Saipan, Puerto Rico, all of our protectorates. Alaska has numerous transmitters covering a big part of the population center. And I wanted to let you know, in Canada, Weather Radio, and it's all spelled one word in Canada, Weather Radio, has 250 transmitters, 200 to 250. They've been putting up more in the far north reaches to reach the populations and the indigenous populations, the Inuits, so they can communicate weather information. And that's been going on the last decade. They've been expanding the NOAA Weather or Weather Radio. It's actually Environment Canada Weather Radio. It's not NOAA, but they've been expanding that network in Canada the last decade. Now, the smartphone came out in 2008. We went from Palm Pilots to Apple iPhones in 2008, and then it really became now my 90-year-old mother-in-law has an iPhone. So everybody has some kind of a smartphone device pretty much now. And people think that is the what's going to save their life, and it's a wonderful tool. I can't take anything away from it. But a $30 NOAA Weather Radio receiver is more timely. It's battery backup. It doesn't require a telephone network to get you the information, and it will work when a lot of other things fail. So in a real disaster, even like the fires right now in California, having a NOAA Weather Radio, if the National Weather Service and CAL FIRE could get together on this, they could warn everyone in danger of getting burned or smoked all at once using the NOAA Weather Radio network. The transmitters are in place. It's just most people out west don't have a receiver unless they live right on the coast, because it is the backbone warning device for the tsunami warning network for the Pacific region of the Weather Service and the Western region. So this is how, if you live at Malibu Beach in California and you want to know if a tsunami's coming, you can have a NOAA Weather Radio and you can get a watch and a warning on tsunami on NOAA Weather Radio. That comes out of Palmer, Alaska, at the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, where they issue the watches and warnings for tsunamis, and they can actually tone alert all the weather radios sending out a bulletin. So something to think about, because there's a lot of other hazards that aren't just tornadoes and hurricanes out there that continue to be something that can cause life and loss of life and property. Required weekly and monthly tests are very important. On Wednesdays or Saturdays, usually 11 a.m. until noon, and again from 6 to 7 in the evenings, the National Weather Service, your local National Weather Service office, and there's 126 or so National Weather Service offices, 122 I think it is now, but they each office will test weekly and monthly the tone alert features. And believe it or not, mine got tested today here in Kansas City at 11 o'clock, and it's currently flashing the advisory light to let me know that the advisory is the required weekly test was just received, and letting me know that my receiver is working well and picking up information from the Pleasant Hill National Weather Service office, which is on the southeast side of the metro area, about 30 miles outside of town, where the radar is located, and the Missouri River Valley River Forecast Center is also located there. So again, specific area message encoding came about in 1997. It really became more prolific, where you could actually buy the receivers for around $100 in 1999 and 2000. And we were promoting that in Kansas City. I left after the Gerald, Texas tornado event down in Texas. I got a job in Kansas City, got a job offer, and my wife and kids and I all moved to Kansas City. In 1998, I became a severe weather meteorologist and weekend and morning meteorologist at KCTV5 here in Kansas City, and I worked there for 2 contracts. I was there 6 years, and we promoted NOAA Weather Radio on the air, and we had a pretty strong relationship with giving out coupons with Radio Shack for $10 to knock that price of SAME radios down. They started out around $100. We got them down to about $70 with the coupons. And we promoted Weather Radio really well, and Radio Shack was the go-to place. Radio Shack was always the go-to place to get a weather radio. Radio Shack now has gone out of business in most places, and they've had a lot of, the internet and the way people buy electronics now has changed quite a bit. But that was the place where we would send people. And even in Texas, when I was on TV down there, I would send people to the local Radio Shack to buy a NOAA Weather Radio receiver. And sometimes they would sell out and be out of stock for months after we would just mention it one time on television, because that many people would hear us, understand it, and go get them. And there's an interesting story. I was telling Henry earlier about it, that we had a reporter at the TV station in Waco, where I worked, KCEN, and she was dating a assistant manager at Radio Shack, store manager, I think. And he came to pick her up one night and asked me when I was going to take her weather radio back on TV and tone alerted again. And I looked at him like, how did you know I did that? He goes, because we sold out of weather radios for 6 weeks, and I made bonus in my store for the first time in years, because we sold that many weather radio receivers because of that mention on television. Because television has strong broadcast power. It's amazing when you're talking to people that trust you and you're a local meteorologist. It's a powerful tool. So having that and learning that, and that was back when we just had the 1050 hertz tone. We didn't have SAME yet, but SAME came in, like I said, into the 90s, and that changed weather radio. Instead of warning 6 counties at once, you could warn 1 county or 1 municipality at a time using the warnings for tornadoes or whatever the threat is. And that really is a game changer, because the biggest complaint with weather radio up until SAME came out was the over warning of NOAA Weather Radio. And again, now you can warn down to the city or the municipality or the parish in Louisiana down to that level using the tone alert. If the SAME burst, and then followed by the 1050 hertz, which will set off all the older radios still, because that's grandfathered in at this time. So, boy, I just jumped ahead there. A little humor for you guys. I believe that you might know who Dorothy is. I do live in Kansas. I live on the Kansas side of Kansas City. And the current 2000 speech-to-text voices for NOAA Weather Radio are called the New Paul or Paul II for English broadcast. And again,
for Sunday night,
if you can hear that,
with a low in the lower 40s. For Monday, sunny with a high in the upper 60s.
That's Paul. And then there's Violeta, the Spanish language broadcast voice that goes out on those 5 transmitters and then across Puerto Rico that's being used now. And Spanish language is getting spread more as we have more Spanish-speaking population in the U.S. The need to get warnings out and is very important. And I was very fortunate to get to go to the dedications of the weather radio transmitters in the NOAA and down in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. And that was an amazing opportunity. And I also got to go to the dedication of the Hialeah transmitter in Miami, where I actually tried to speak Spanish and did a decent job, I guess, speaking it. They let me speak Spanish in the group, and that was really, it was fun to do the press conference and actually address everybody in Spanish. So they clapped. They were being nice. But so it was nice to see that happen, because we're all about saving lives. This is all about getting the message to the populations and letting them take precautions and save lives. So more information about NOAA Weather Radio can be found at weather.gov/NWR. NWR means NOAA Weather Radio. So by just going to this, doing a search on weather.gov/NWR, you can find all the information about the SAME codes for your area, what transmitter you should be tuned to, the frequency, the SAME code that you need to put in to make your radio specific to your county or parish or municipality. And all of that is available out there by going to that website. And I also recommend mobile.weather.gov for something you can put on your smartphone to get forecast. It's amazing. The National Weather Service cannot legally have an app because people in corporate America, weather corporate entities in the private sector have kept the Weather Service out of the app field, but they have a widget called mobile. I think it's mobile.weather.gov. Just look up mobileweather.gov.
Bruce, I'll put these on the website.
Okay.
So on your, there's a page for this particular broadcast or webinar, and we'll include the National Weather Radio page and the other one as well. So look for that.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Henry. I appreciate that very much. And I wanted to throw this out there for everybody. There's a cartoon. The old Mark Trail cartoon was the spokesperson for NOAA Weather Radio has been Mark Trail, which is an old cartoon in many newspapers for decades and decades. And the artist who actually created this cartoon and the author, he actually, Jack Elrod, was a Southern gentleman from around the Atlanta area. He dedicated, these personalized Mark Trail awards to anybody who did something with NOAA Weather Radio that was out of the ordinary. And there's around 200, maybe a few more Mark Trail Award recipients across America. And many of them helped save a life through NOAA Weather Radio or did something special with weather radio. And Jack passed away probably about a decade ago or less, and many years ago. And got to meet him, and he gave me some signed artwork and gave me a Mark Trail Award. Actually, it was given to me in Washington back in 2006. But that Mark Trail Award has meant a lot to me, and all the 200 plus people that have received them across America over decades are really, it's something that meant a lot to them. And I wanted to thank him. And if you've ever seen the Mark Trail cartoon, every few months or so, he would throw something in there about weather radio and get the information you need 24 hours a day. Get a NOAA Weather Radio because it can save your life. And that's what I still tell people. And I have no connection to the NOAA Weather Radio industry. I'm a TV, newspaper, multimedia meteorologist now, and that is what I'm doing. And I'm continuing to do that for the near future. I'm chief meteorologist, and my email address, if you need to email me, is bruce.thomas@newspressnow.com. And you can watch me do the weather tonight at 9 o'clock Central Time live on streaming at newspressnow.com. It's something that I went back into as my career has taken a lot of turns over the years. I'm actually back after retiring from the weather radio industry last year, and I'm back in television and helping to train young meteorologists and enjoying myself again in my latter parts of my career as a meteorologist. Henry, that is my 45 minutes. Henry, I'm ready to do 15 minutes with the questions.
Sure. Great job. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to do this for us today. Some really good information here. You know, it's interesting. We had the survey questions at the beginning, and we asked how many people own weather radios, and two-thirds of our broadcast group here that's on with us today have them, but a third did not. And so I would encourage you, if you have a chance, to get one. They make nice Christmas presents, especially if you live in severe weather areas. It can be like having a smoke detector in your house in the middle of the night and give you a warning when it's needed. So what do you think, Bruce? People can buy these online. They can go to a local store. What is the best, or some ideas of where you can get one?
The best place right now is to go to Amazon.com. I mean, okay. Amazon's got everything. You can choose from the different brands. Make sure that it's Public Alert certified. It's got that designation. I put the slide back up. Public Alert certified. You need that designation because that means that radio is SAME. And you want SAME because you want to be able to make it county specific. And being county specific, you don't get overwarned for everything around. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get the warning for the county to the west of you if you want to, but I believe in always having your county to your south and west in your radio so that you get a little more lead time on a tornado. And, you know, programming, I truly have programmed hundreds of thousands of NOAA Weather radios in my lifetime. And my former colleague, Bruce Jones, he's programmed as many or more than I have. I have to give him credit. He's been out there and done it too. He's still doing it. He works, at Midland Radio Corporation. That's where I worked for 15 years. And they do make a fine receiver. And Radio Shack, if you can find Radio Shack receivers, they're still good. Even the old ones are good. They're very, very high quality. There are other manufacturers out there that make them. There are some with cranks on them that are decent, but the crank is kind of a gimmick. It's the crank to make your own power. It works for a little while. It's not as good as having a battery backup, plug into the wall, desktop NOAA Weather Radio. But if you're camping or if you're out in the wilderness, that crank is a wonderful thing. But for your home weather radio unit, get a desktop battery backup NOAA Weather Radio. I have one on my desk. I hope to have one. And my kids kidded me, but when they both went to college, I gave them both a crank weather radio. That's all they would take. They wouldn't take a desktop, but they took them. And believe it or not, my daughter had a lot of tornado warnings when she was in college down in Mississippi. So she was thankful for it. And it does come in handy. Even when you have apps on your phone, this comes on before your app notifies you. And we have now WEA, the Wireless Emergency Alert System, that sends direct warnings to mobile devices. And that's a very good service, does a great job, but it's not as fail-proof as NOAA Weather Radio. I can tell you that. So have both, have 2 or 3 ways of warning your family. If you live in Tornado Alley, you live in an area that has tsunamis, you have an area that has landslides, mudslides, earthquakes. If you have natural disasters, you should have an emergency radio that gets the NOAA Weather Radio band and has the alert feature.
Yeah, one thing, when just like your rain gauge, make sure you take it out of the box. It's funny, I've given these as gifts to family members. I'll go back a year later and I see it sitting on the shelf. It's still in the box, so it isn't going to do you any good just having it there. You want to get it plugged in, and it'll help you with that. Well, let's go ahead and take some questions. We've got some time. So when you put in your question, put where you're from. We're getting a bunch of them coming across here now, and Bruce will do his best to answer some of these questions. I've got a quick one for you. So you mentioned Canada, and it's weather radio. Are other countries, so places in Europe, Mexico, do they have similar things like we have here in the U.S.?
Not many places have, no one has as an elaborate network as the U.S. I mean, the 1,032 transmitters. Canada is very similar now because they have in their population centers. Canada only has 10% of the population compared to the U.S. They're 10%. So, 200 transmitters does a really nice job covering their, 90+% of their population. In Mexico City and in Mexico, they have SARMEX, and they're doing that for earthquake warnings and other things, other hazards. But Mexico is slowly developing SARMEX. I don't know a lot about it, but it is something in development and is something they're using for earthquakes in Mexico City, which are very, prolific. They have a lot of really, powerful earthquakes in Mexico City. And SARMEX is what they call their network. I just don't know how robust it is or how well it's been spread. But I do know Environment Canada Weather Radio, one word. It's an amazing system. And all the weather radios you buy in the U.S. work in Canada. It's the same frequencies. So you just have to set it for where you are in Canada. So that's a really good thing, especially if like a crank portable radio and you're traveling. I know the border's closed right now, so it makes it difficult to travel to Canada for Americans. But because
we have several or many CoCoRaHS observers in Canada who several are on this broadcast today. So that's great that they know about that. Okay, here we go. I'm going to get the questions rolling in here now. We'll see how many we get through. And I'm going to combine a couple of them because there's similar questions here. So I've got one here says, where do the 5% live that are not covered? Also on that, there's from Gina from Johnson County, Wyoming said, doesn't seem to be any coverage there. And then Penny lives on the UP of Michigan and was wondering how many transmitters are there and how do they find out about where those are? You had a map. So anyway, let's get those three questions.
Right. The first thing, you go to weather.gov/NWR and they'll show you a map and you just click on it where you live and it'll show you your transmitter coverage. So the 5% that aren't covered are in the Intermountain West, in some of the very desolate areas of Nevada and parts of maybe Wyoming and Colorado where there's not a large population there, but they have really built those transmitters now to overlap. They even have one in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, up in northern Colorado. They have a transmitter site there. So you have to find out for yourself by going, because I don't know where you live specifically, but that less than 5% that's not covered is generally in the Intermountain West, in valleys in the Intermountain West. And they've done a really good job of filling in big areas that don't have coverage. Wyoming could be in a coverage gap there in Wyoming. If you live in a valley, in West Virginia, you might not be able to get a signal, but they're covered, there's transmitters covering the state, but you have to, you might need an external antenna. If you live in a metal mobile home, you can't pick up a signal inside a Faraday cage. So if you live in an old mobile home that had metal siding on it, you might need to get an external antenna to put on the outside of your house, which they're sold. You can get them. They're like $20, $30 to allow that signal to get to your weather radio. So there's all kinds of little things that can happen, but I'm telling you, most people can get the signal if they have a good receiver and they don't have a metal wrapping around their home, or even a metal roof can deter some of the signal. But just move your weather radio closer to a window and put it right next to a window. It's always better if you're not getting a good signal, and it can get the signal better. Those are just a few things. Did I cover all three of those? Did I get it?
Yeah, and I've got another one. John from Utah was saying he's wondering, he has trouble getting coverage with the weather radio there in his county. Any hope of new transmitters being funded in the near future for some of these areas where the signal's not being picked up?
To be honest, I don't think there's a lot going on there. I mean, occasionally there will be a transmitter or a put up or a relay to strengthen a signal in an area, but you'd have to call your county emergency manager and have he or she work with the National Weather Service. There are some funds usually available to do some of those at the county level through Homeland Security grants, and it can happen. But if you're in a really rural area, take your weather radio outside and see if you can get the signal outside of your house, then bring it back inside, because it may be interference from your home where you're not getting the signal. So I always program weather radios and take them to people and then start by showing them, the signal. If they're having trouble getting the signal, I say, stand outside your home, because your actual structure, your building you're in may be interfering with you getting the signal. And you may have a signal out there that you're not able to receive inside your home. You have to go outside, and then you put an external antenna. And most high quality weather radio desktop receivers all have a RCA jack on the back of them, where you just plug the external antenna in, and then you glue it on the outside of your window. It comes with a little glue patch. You put it on. It's not hard to do. You don't have to drill it.
What about the app? I've got the app on my phone. Would that work in some of these places? There's a weather radio app that you can pull up
I don't know the app has
it doesn't have warnings,
32 transmitted.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear some weather information, but I don't think they have. I think they have maybe. I don't know. Or somewhere like 40 to 100. There was something called Weather Underground. They used to stream. Weather Underground used to stream before the Weather Channel took it over. Used to stream weather radio in like 40 or 50 areas out of 1,000. So it's not a complete coverage usually on most of the apps or any of that kind of stuff. But that's changing all the time. There's so many weather apps out there, but having a desktop NOAA Weather Radio with the alert feature is what you need. If you're outside, you want to pick up the weather on weather radio on an app, that's beautiful. But you can also go to your browser probably and go straight in and read it off the weather service at weather.gov. So
this would be a neat thing for them to put in cars at some time. I don't know if that's available.
I tried.
But wouldn't that be neat as you're driving around the country? It picks it up and puts a warning out. And you turn around, don't drown, and so forth.
Yeah. And Henry, I want to address that. And that was a really big disappointment, because I tried to work with Ford to get it put into their their big deal on the weather radio and their car stereos. And I worked with a lot of different manufacturers over the years trying to expand it. There is a chip now, a NOAA Weather Radio chip made by Scilabs, Texas. It sells for $1 or $2 to the manufacturer, a couple bucks. And you can put that in any device, and you have an SAME NOAA Weather Radio. And it's only cost $1 or $2 to do it. But I could not get Ford to do it. I met with the president of Ford Motor Company at the Consumer Electronics Show. I got a private meeting with him, and I asked him to do it. He looked at me, said thank you, and that was it. And I couldn't get it done. I tried. You know what's interesting? A lot of the European cars used to have NOAA Weather Radio. Even Subaru used to have NOAA Weather Radio in the older models, and they took it out. I mean, you would think Subaru would put it in. They tout, how they're so great.
Well, it's funny because I've just got a message here from Carol. Says her old Subaru had NOAA Weather Radio in it, and Michael writes in and says his BMW and Can-Am motorcycle have the weather radio installed. So there are a couple, I guess, out there that are doing that, and that's
Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson put it on their big time dresser bikes in the stereo component, because I know that for a fact. And the big Harleys, the big dressers have it, and some of the big motorcycles. So there are people that know that chip is available, the Scilabs chip. It's about a couple of dollars to buy 1 million of them.
Yeah.
At $2 a piece, of course. If you're building 1 million radios, the price goes way down. But
I hear you. Yeah. Hey, Carmela. So Carmela says she's got the plug-in radio with battery backup. How do you know when the battery needs to be replaced? Is there something on the radio that will let you know the battery is getting old?
Right. I don't know the model she has, but there's usually a battery indicator light. There are on most of the weather radios on the front corner, like mine when I started. today was fully charged, and I'm down to 3/4 because I'm not plugged in right now, as I wanted to have it in my hand. But yeah, and here's the thing: every time you fall back or spring forward, put new batteries in your weather radio. Every time you put new batteries in your smoke detector, put new batteries in your weather radio. So just do it and don't think about it. Just do it automatically. Don't let old batteries destroy your weather radio, because that's what happens with alkaline batteries. I highly recommend the Energizer lithium batteries. They're very expensive, but they don't have the acid in them. They don't leak. Even when they expire, they don't leak into your radio. And if you
Gotcha.
use those Energizer lithium batteries, and they're the only ones that had the patent on it, those batteries have a shelf life of 20 years now. Shelf life. That's not when you're using them, but that's just they're sitting dormant. And they sell them over the counter. 4-pack of AA's are $8 with a coupon usually.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend it. I've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of weather radios destroyed with cheap alkaline batteries. I mean, I've, like I said, programmed more weather radios than most anyone on earth in my 15 years
I
of
bet.
working at weather radio. And I will tell you, don't put cheap dollar store batteries in your weather radio, because it's a life-saving device, but the most
Right.
expensive, best batteries you can in it. Because why you have it is to, what's going to happen when the weather gets bad? The power goes out. So why wouldn't you have the best batteries? So, and I don't make any money from Energizer. I just know that their lithium batteries won't destroy your weather radio when they go bad, and they have a 20-year shelf life. So it's worth the extra. It's 3 or 4 times more than
Sure.
the cheap batteries, but they last a long, long time. So
Okay, couple questions here on a similar question. Talking about the same code, SAME code. So Blaine writes, and how can you check if your same code is working? And then also Robert was wondering that we learned how to program the radio, but his radio doesn't do a weekly test. And then finally, James lives in Chicago, and he says here the counties are subdivided for weather alerts. Will same have the granularity going forward? Currently, one same covers all of the county.
right, and there's some new software at the National Weather Service. On the front of every SAME code is a 0, and that 0 can be broken down from 1 to 9, and they can subdivide counties or any kind of like a nuclear plant. There's a place in North Texas, up in the panhandle of Texas, called Pantex. It's where they construct and deconstruct nuclear bombs, and they have their own SAME code. So the city of St. Louis has its own SAME code. So the first digit on the front of that 6-digit SAME code is a 0. So once they start, the National Weather Service does this in Pima County, Arizona, and up in Rapid City, South Dakota. They break these counties down, because some really large counties, into thirds. They can break them into ninths, but it's that first digit on an SAME code, which is a 0, that can be changed to 1, 2, 4, 5. But there's a lot of pushback in the Weather Service on doing that, and that was one of my crusades for years and years, to get the Weather Service to move forward with it. Because when they originally announced SAME, that was the next upgrade, and now 20 years has passed, and it's still not like it should be. I mean, but it's difficult. It's difficult to break up a county geographically. You do it by highways, rivers, universities.
Sure.
It's hard. It's not an easy thing, but it is doable. I also want to tell the gentleman who asked about how he knows his SAME code is correct. Well, you need to look. You need to go to that website, click on your county and read it, make sure it's the right one, and then you get the weekly or monthly test where it says advisory. Like today is a test day. It's Wednesday. And my weather radio here on my desk, it's set up, says advisory, and the advisory light is lit up. What I did was I asked the National Weather Service many years ago to extend, instead of just doing the advisory for 5 minutes on the test days, to let it run for many hours. So when people come home, they can see that advisory light. And usually if you have the arrow keys, you hit the top arrow key, it'll tell you it's for the required weekly test on most weather radios. So there's ways, there's lots of, if you quote what manufacturer you have it with, there's good customer service with a few. But the main thing is look for that required weekly test, because they test them weekly, and at least once a month they test them. So that's how you know. And be sure to check, go to weather.gov/NWR and find your county or your municipality or your parish. Make sure that code matches up in your radio.
So, Bruce, I've got the last question of the day. We're going to cut these off here.
Great.
And this one might be a little fun. We'll see if you're willing to try this. Lewis wants to know if you can give us a Spanish weather warning in your own Spanish, and he promises not to make fun of it. So, you want to try that, or maybe not?
Oh, I don't speak Spanish that well. I'd have to rehearse it. But el tiempo es muy mala.
There you go. Okay.
Bad weather.
We'll look for that one on the weather radio. Well,
yeah,
again,
I appreciate that. He caught me a little off guard there, but if I rehearsed, I'm sure I could do it. There's some wonderful bilingual meteorologists in America now at many TV stations that do a great job. And I applaud them being able to do that, because it's all about saving life and property. And I appreciate you guys having me on today. I'm sorry we ran a little long, but
that's great. We're going to we'll have this recorded, and we should have it up later in the week. If for other folks that want to listen to this, we'll also have Bruce's slides that you can go through and look at those. And so again, thank you. We've been wanting to do this for a long time. Really appreciate your time today. And we'll be in touch again soon. So again, a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me very much. Thank you.
As we close out today's program, we want to let you know that our next Weather Talk webinar will be taking place in just 2 weeks. So this one's coming up pretty quickly on Thursday, October 15th. So mark your calendars. We will be switching over to instead of GoToMeeting, we're going to start using Zoom starting tomorrow on October 1st. We're still setting that up, so there's no registration out there yet. We promise to have that up hopefully within the next week so you can register for this. But it will feature Barb Boosted of NOAA's Warning Decision Training Division. Her presentation will be on ranking winter severity with the Accumulated Winter Season Severity Index. So if you like winter weather and you want to know how severe is this winter or in my area, this is something that'll be really interesting. So we'll have that information on our website for signing up for that. And again, it'll be a little different than we've done in the past, but I think you'll like this new platform. So before I forget, when signing off today, please take that short survey. It's going to pop up on your screen as you leave the broadcast, and we really appreciate you being with us today. Well, until we meet again, stay safe and stay healthy. This is Henry Regis for the rest of the CoCoRaHS team saying goodbye for now, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.